Hello again, and welcome to another day of daily Bible study. We're continuing on with the Gospel of John, chapter 13. We're finishing up the story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. So we're going to pick up here starting in verse 12. So it says, though, when he had washed their feet and had taken his garments and reclined at the table again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you should do as I did to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is one who sent him, nor is one who is sent greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. I do not speak of all of you. I know the ones I have chosen, but it is that Scripture may be fulfilled. He who eats my bread has lifted up his heel against me. From now on, I am telling you before it comes to pass, so that when it does occur, you may believe that I am he. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me." So something I didn't mention at the end of yesterday's, and I kind of meant to, but it fits just as well here, is to be aware of the fact of who is all at the table when Jesus is doing these things. Because you say it's the disciples, right? But specifically, Judas is there. I mean, he is named specifically as being here. And there will come a time later on where we read that Judas is going to get up and leave. But until that moment happens, everything that Jesus says, everything that Jesus does includes Judas as well, which means that Judas gets his feet washed by Jesus. And Judas also participates in the supper that Jesus is sharing with his people. So it's important to realize that whatever Jesus is doing here, being a sinner, being not yet as devoted as we ought to be, not yet having grown all these things, even having a history of being actively wicked, does not somehow get us off the hook, because Judas was invited to all of these things as well. Now, I also want to point out this idea that he's saying, you call me teacher and Lord. He says, you're right, I'm your teacher, I'm your Lord. So since I'm your teacher and your Lord, you should listen to what I had to say, both because I'm teaching you what is good, and also because I'm the boss, I'm the Lord. I can show you and tell you what you need to do. And he says, what I'm telling you to do is this job that I have done, that the world says I should not do because I'm a teacher and a Lord. He says, I'm doing it. And so what that means is, being a teacher, being a Lord, doing all these things does not get you off the hook of having to do it too. In the history of the church, generally speaking, foot washing has not been considered to be like a sacrament. The Catholic Church has 7 sacraments, but I do not believe that foot washing is one of them. I may be mistaken on that. It may be called service or something. The classic Protestant churches have tended to only have 2 sacraments, which is baptism and communion. But I understand there's every once in a while there's been a holiness-geared church that has tried to emphasize foot washing as well, and to raise it to a level of a sacrament, because Jesus commanded us to do it. Now, the thing is, on the one hand, I want to acknowledge the reality of foot washing. I don't want to kind of explain the foot washing away, because clearly it's important that the foot washing means foot washing in a real sense, which is that it is a sign that we are serving one another, we're taking the position of the servant, we're taking the position of the most lowly. But if we get caught up and say, because sometimes we think about this, we do communion, right? And then we have this moment, and it's an incredibly important moment. But if we then don't go out and live what we say we believe at the table, something is still lacking. It's not like the fullness of communion has taken place. In the same way, we at one point we were baptized, or we are baptized, and then at some point, though, we do have to live out that baptism. We can't just cling to the fact that I've done this act, or this act was done to me, and therefore I'm off the hook. No, this act has been done, therefore you're on the hook to live according to what's happened to you, what you've experienced. So in the same way with foot washing, it's not so much about I did a ritual foot washing in the context of a church service or a retreat or whatever. The point is to live the life of service. And one story comes to my mind in my own life where in the first church I was under appointment, I think it was in the first year, we had an adult Sunday school group that was talking about Christianity and Islam. And one of the things they wanted to do at the end of their kind of study was to invite an actual Muslim imam to come and share from his perspective, just so they could learn. It wasn't a question about trying to convince one another they're wrong, but just trying to understand one another. And so he arrived at the end of the church service, because they had Sunday school after that, and people were gathering around for coffee and all the rest. And somebody ends up accidentally backing up into him and spilling their coffee on the ground. And I see this happening, and I think to myself, I am going to try to model service for everybody, but especially for this guy who does not share my faith. And so I'm watching it happen and I'm ready to go before I can get things done. I mean, and again, I'm trying to emphasize I was acting in the moment. Before I could get to the paper towels, the imam had already gotten there, had grabbed towels and things, and gotten on his hands and knees and started wiping up the coffee. And this guy was also a professor at UNI. So he's both a professor at UNI and a Muslim imam, and he is demonstrating service in a way that I had hoped to, but the only reason I couldn't do it is because he beat me to it. And it's a reminder that no matter what we've got going on, no matter what our history is, no matter how dignified we think we are, Jesus can strip down to his undergarments, wrap a towel around his waist, and serve. And it's possible that different services are going to look different. But the one thing we can't say ever as a Christian is, I've gotten to the point I no longer have to do that kind of thing. And I think it's really important because it's so easy to feel entitled, especially if we've been someplace for a long time, if we feel like we've got a rhythm of it. There's always a call to service. So I guess my question for you today, especially when we can't necessarily get all together in the same way we might, but how can you serve one another? And how are you serving one another? Because I think that if you sit down and think through the ways you may be serving other people, you may realize you're doing more than you realize, or you may take a candid look at yourself and say, gosh, I'm not really serving anybody. I mostly get served. In which case the question is, how then can you begin to share in that serving ministry of Jesus? Well, that's all I have for today. Come back to me tomorrow. We'll continue on through this chapter in John. Have a good day.